So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Konan. So let's start the series. 3 months prior, Osana had arrived the day after I returned to the base, battered, bleeding, and hardly able to stand. She woke me up, which surprised me because I thought that Naruto's friend would have killed her as soon as he achieved his objective, whatever it was. When Luna told me what was going on, we rushed to her room. She was there, still and sound asleep. Before then, I could only make out the dark gray covers underneath her slightly translucent body. Now that I can see them clearly, Luna was disappearing and then reappearing in the real world. Every day she was pulled further and more away from us, into the void of everyday existence. Every day, I asked Jashin to come back to our temporary residence and join the safety net we have created for each other. Luna, please come back. Regardless of how awful this planet and its people are, she belongs here because we are here and she belongs among us. The good news is that since Osana's return, there is more food available, and Water Power Man has been pouting less. Let's just say that Hayden had unfortunately gotten into a bit of a battle with Shadow Man again, therefore we need to find someone who is as good at sewing as Kakuzu was. He was lying there, helpless, and Konan had wasted hours of chakra on him when I called the emergency room. In contrast to my personal belief that it would be best to leave him alone for the time being, Pain maintained that we needed all the help we could get without all of the dangerous clan members. He was, let's say, falling apart every now and then, but he was now well, and it only took a few weeks to patch up Raggedy Ann. Other than that, a lot happened over the 3 months. I was finally able to begin my training. Hayden taught me additional Jashinist ideas that appeared absurdly cool, even if he was still deformed. For example, even I, an Naruto specialist, was not aware that when in danger, one might overload chakra and basically go into overdrive. Normally an act would kill someone, but Hayden stated that I should be fine if I didn't use it for too long, because my chakra levels were much greater than normal. Amber, I whispered as I turned to see Osana as she walked in. I stopped hitting the tree that had been the object of my wrath for months. What is it? I saw that Osana had been acting oddly ever since Luna left, as it were, and she sighed. Just because she was gone, I thought she was acting weird. If I may say so, Osana was enraged. No, her voice was softer. Although she and I both knew that we were trying to bring Luna back, she seemed to be thinking more than she should have, and I wasn't sure why. Well, I need to go on a mission. And I might not be back for a while. I furrowed my brows and said mission. Pain's sending you on a mission. After a brief pause and a small shake of her head, she said, no. It's confidential. I'm helping someone. I stood for a bit before my mind finally went into overdrive. What kind of help? And why now of all times? You know Luna needs us now more than ever, I wondered myself. She was sent on a mission, but why? Here what was so important that she needed to take care of it immediately? I began to worry because we all knew how the last mission ended. I couldn't quite place the unusual expression on her face, but it seemed to be a mix of melancholy and despair. I'm aware of Luna's situation. I'll try to finish this mission as quick as possible, but there are tons of ways it could turn out. I've trained enough and, well, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. As she spoke, her eyes blinked rapidly, and there was something strange about them. Her black iris appeared darker than I remembered, but maybe that was just a trick of the light. Since I already felt duped and I'm sure Osana wasn't happy about leaving us so soon, I remained silent as she left. As the sun began to sink, the stately oak quickly became a stump. Like Sakura, I used chakra-enforced punches, but because my punches were driven by wrath and contained 5 times as much chakra, they were 10 times more potent. I used a lot of chakra in one hit, even though Konan advised against it. It was partly because I could, and partly because I've already become used to the feeling of crazy energy building up in my fists. When I first stepped in, I genuinely laughed at the almost sad faces of the dangerous clan members when they learned they would be eating alone tonight. Of all of them, the Water Power Man seemed the most upset, and I could understand why his darling little Osana was gone. I raised an eyebrow at Hayden, who was in the kitchen when he noticed me coming and took hold of my wrist, and said, maybe we have another option. You can cook, right? We've already gone over this. If you count Adara's bombs as cooking, then yes I can cook very well. Hayden let out a sigh. I was hoping she would have taught you a thing or two. I can't believe only one you bitches knows how to use a stove. Just then, 2 more bitches came in. But I could argue that Toby was a much larger jerk than Pain in every manner, shape, and form. Oh no, Toby-senpai doesn't like him, Luna-chan keeps sleeping, nothing is going right. Toby sank to his knees and pretended to cry. Pain simply turned and walked away, refusing to be involved in this. For some reason, I thought I had detected a hint of truth in that final statement, so I stopped there. After smacking Toby in the face before he struck the floor, Hayden shouted, "Aw, shut up, brat, I wasn't talking to you," and left the kitchen. As he did so, Hayden bent his forearm at a strange angle, and I could have lived without seeing the bone in his right arm break beneath the string. Fucking hell. He exclaimed, pushing his broken bone back into place. Neither of us knew why he was still breaking down, but we both agreed that it was just not normal. I turned to everyone and rolled my eyes at Hayden's folly when I heard someone gagging behind me. Well, I can't cook, I said as he was walking away, but I think I can manage some rice balls. Then, as I went about my other business, I set up a rice cooker that I had found collecting dust in a cabinet and let it steam. As I was walking down the corridor, Toby materialized a few inches behind me, breathing down my neck and practically bending over my shoulder. I went to him and glared at him as meanly as I could, asking, "Can I help you?" Toby was enjoying his senpai's company, that's all. I turned to go, glaring at him with my sharpened fangs. I've noticed that since I became a Jashinist, I've inherited a few extra features in addition to my weapon. For instance, rock-hard teeth that are sharp. I only know this because, despite a horrible bruise that lasted for a few hours, none of my teeth fell out after I was unintentionally hit in the face during a training session. Along with my teeth, I have short nails and always will, but I could easily scratch someone's eyes out right now if I wanted to. It was a very graphic idea, but it was true. "Stop following me, you little." I said sorry, Amber-senpai. Toby said, looking up at me in a mocking panic after stumbling and falling. I was in a bit of a mood. Things have only gotten worse after Osana left. Without her here, what would we do? What would I do was the more important question. I sighed as I kept moving forward, and after about 5 steps, I decided to look for hiding. Why, if I find out, I'll be damned. But before I could reach the corner, I heard Toby's voice echoing across the corridor. "Amber-san, I need to tell you something about Luna-senpai." I turned around warily and asked, "What?" He told me with a smile, "Something special is going to happen to Luna very soon," and then he whirled away like a little pansy. I asked, feeling my head tilt to the side in confusion, "What do you mean special?" When Toby didn't answer, I furrowed my brows. I contemplated going after him and beating the living daylights out of him, before realizing that he wasn't really like that under the act. I'll have to figure out what he meant later. But for now, I went back to searching for hiding. In his room, I located said masochistic bastard and obnoxious pain in the ass, sleeping comfortably on his bed and contemplating while gazing up at the ceiling. I sat next to him and remarked, "I used the rice cooker for dinner," without looking at him. Rather, I stared straight at the wall across from me. I didn't know why it was so difficult for me to look at him just now. I frowned and remarked, "Really? Well, that's fucking great, little girl. Even I could have done that." "But you didn't," I responded with a smile, as a conceit sprang from his forehead. He responded by pulling me down and onto the bed, thereby making me a pillow. I chose to go check on the food after neglecting it for a few minutes, but hiding refused to let go when I said, "Do you want to starve?" "I'm okay with that," I said, but the Jashiness would not leave. "Hiding, come on, stop being the little kid you are," I pleaded, despite the fact that we both knew it would never work. I slapped his head, but it only flattened his hair a little bit. He rolled over and buried his face in my tummy, making a funny noise. I could only hear the vibrating of his vocal cords as he murmured something. Slumping back into his pillow, I folded my arms behind my head and said, "Okay, I try to do something and not be a lazy ass, but you won't let me." Hiding remained still, and at last I saw that I was becoming asleep. When I woke up, I could hear mild snoring coming from somewhere close. I looked down at Hiding, who was still on my stomach. The sight delighted me more than I could have ever dreamed. I smiled softly at him and ran a hand over his silver hair before I went back to sleep. The day I got back, I think I went crazy. Although I haven't come back for a while, I realized I needed to get better after seeing Luna lying there, all but dead. When training started up again, I did all I could to avoid being alone with Toby. You know, a little jerk face. Despite his happy and innocent exterior upon my return, I could tell he was angry on the inside. He was annoyed, and I had a feeling he was going to choke me right then. He ought to have killed me long ago, and to be honest, I didn't know why I was still alive. What a power man, and I grew closer after that, and although I probably shouldn't have, I told him what had happened between Toby and me. Even though he promised not to tell, I still need to watch him while the three of us are in the same room by ourselves. The only other person who knows the entire story is Itachi. He asserted that he should have recognized Toby's pursuit of me earlier because he knew that Toby wanted a companion from Naruto. He knows that in order to clear their name, he wants the last Uchiha had to battle with him. I shouted, at first surprised, that Itachi was still alive. "I thought that you fought Naruto, friend. Not to be rude, but aren't you supposed to be dead?" Itachi blinked and then added, "Osana, I'm not dead. You've missed a lot in the weeks that you were gone." "Then why is Naruto friend with the—" "Naruto friend is not here, he's still out there." I was unable to fully understand what was happening, so I had to take a deep breath and try to make sense of it all. But I had no doubt that the dangerous clan cloaks were being worn by Naruto's companion and his crew. I kept making dinner in spite of this, though. I guess it had become a comforting routine for myself and the others present. In the first week following my return, Itachi pulled me aside one sunny morning after training. He didn't say anything at first, but I could sense what he was discussing. "This is about the plan, isn't it?" "Yes," Itachi responded as he took something from a hidden shelf and brought me to the emergency room or cleanup room, as Amber called it. He turned and gripped it behind his back. "What's that?" He cleared his throat. This is so you can counter all that comes your way. By midnight tonight these are what will aid you in your journey, and by the end it will be your choice whether you want to keep them or not. The glass jar with 2 eyes, not just any eyes, but red power eyes, was then displayed to me. Itachi, where did you? I murmured, lightly touching the glass. He looked at me. I've had them for a while, kept safe from you know who. Osana, if you choose, hopefully by tomorrow you will become a full-fledged Uchiha. You look like one, talk like one, act like one, you are Uchiha by those standards. But friend won't even know. And if he believes there is another. I interjected, holding up a hand, I understand. You want me to possess the power of the red powers. He nodded and said, but, why Itachi? He grabbed the jar from me and returned it to the shelf, saying, I can teach you how to use them, only at night when the others are asleep, and can't see the shift in your eyes. The left eye is a manjikyu from a man by the name of Shusei, and the right eye is from another that I cannot name. I blinked a couple of times and asked myself, Christ Itachi. Why would do this for me? Without another word, something happened that convinced me that the world would end if he did that to anyone besides Naruto's friend. He hugged me. Become Uchiha, and make our clan great again. I will never be able to fathom why he placed such faith in me. What was there for me to lose? A tiny part of me was screaming that this was a trap. I guess he's a water power man, but I'm sure he'd be really happy without me. Upon reflection, I guess I had a lot to lose because Luna and Amber were also present. I walked along the empty hallway with a heavy sigh. Itachi was waiting for me on the other side of the base door. As I was walking, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I looked back, I saw that nobody was there. It was only when I touched the smooth rock that I realized who he was. Luckily, it was Water Power Man, not Toby, who did it. Instead of leaning down and using me as a pillow, he leaned against me and put his arms around me. Things were awkward because of our height difference, but we always worked things out. He played with a lock of my hair and questioned, where are you going so late? It's hard to slink away from Water Power Man, you know. Any member of the Dangerous clan, actually, but especially the Water Power Man. He watches me like an obsessive possessive hawk. Itachi and I need to talk about some things. He turned me to him gently and raised an eyebrow, asking, is that so? I said, Water Power Man, please, it's urgent, while keeping eye contact and giving a gentle nod. We rarely need to use each other's names, therefore it was one of the few times I had used his name. He pursed his lips and looked down at the floor for a time. He appeared apprehensive, but he was also upset about something. But when did he never nod? With a heavy sigh, he only answered, okay. I'll wait here. When he let go of me from his strong grip, I turned to open the door. When it closed, Itachi came out of the darkness. I think Water Power Man knows something, I muttered, biting my lower lip in anxiety as I was taken aback by his sudden appearance. It would surprise me if he didn't. Osana, are you sure you want to carry out with this new plan? I hesitated just a little bit before nodding. Itachi took the jar out and held it up to the moonlight, then remarked, very well. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I just knew that I was being carried by someone when I woke up in total darkness. Since I was lying on his bed and he was watching me from a nearby chair, I initially thought it was Itachi, but it was actually Water Power Man. Not long after, I dozed out. I blinked and bounded upright, God knows how long it took. Everything was visible to me, perhaps too clearly. Awake are we? When I looked at Water Power Man, his face was bluer, his teeth seemed sharper, and every other part of his body was sharper, if that could be claimed. What happened last night? I wondered myself as I clutched my head, a full-blown migraine imminent. I'm not entirely sure, Itachi handed you off to me saying you fainted, but I'm not buying that story. I cracked up, will you believe me if I say I have no idea what happened then? It feels like I have a hangover. I believe you. He murmured, with a small smile on his lips as he stood up to go, you have that look in your eyes. As the door softly closed behind him, tears began to well up in my eyes. When I stepped to the bathroom and was shocked by my reflection, my eyes weren't watering. Blood was pouring out of them. Even without the use of the red abilities, my eyes didn't look exactly like mine, albeit they were still as dark as darkness. I ran out of the room and into Itachi's room, where Uchiha was reading on his bed. Without a word, I simply gestured wildly at the blood on my face. He wiped the blood off with a tissue and led me to a sink where he carefully removed the stains. Remain calm, Osana. It will take time to get used to an outside body, but if Hata can do it, then so can you. Right, Itachi said as she taught me the red power practices and gave me a quick rundown of the family's history. It was fun to learn how to counter his genjutsu. He taught me stories and had me learn through reenacted warfare as I got stronger. As I fell to the ground, gasping for air, one evening I asked, how do you know how these fights happened if you weren't there? Itachi sat down next to me and said, there is a lot you don't know about me, Osana, but technically I was there. I shot back, lifting an eyebrow. And a lot I do, I said. It was strange that he would say that, but I didn't think much of it. Ignoring me, Itachi stood back up, signaling that training had resumed. It was still dark outside when I got back. Itachi and I were now training late at night after I was moved to train with him during the day. Something continued to nag in the back of my mind. I should not have trusted this new scheme, and I suspected Itachi was somehow betraying me, but what could I do? Every day, the feeling became stronger until it consumed all of my thoughts. Since that was all I could think about and concentrate on, it was already mission time when I was finally ready to confront him. Itachi, there's something I need to ask you, I had said. He opened his eyes from meditation and said, yes. Well, it's about the mission. He raised his hand and said, right, the mission. Speaking of that, I think it's time we get the plan going. Itachi stood up and began leading me through the door to Pain's office. But Itachi, I said, but he wasn't listening, and I really didn't need that. All I got was Itachi dragging me around mindlessly as I tried to push back, so I could finally say what I wanted to say. I found myself standing outdoors and informed Amber that I was going in a haze of orange and feathers. I was revealing to her the goal I had long concealed. It was a comfort as well as a new dread. I knew she would not be pleased with this. I was simply telling, though, and I wasn't actually hearing myself. My body moved like a machine, as if it were in a tired stupor. My mind remained clear. Were I experiencing hallucinations? Or maybe I was in charge. It was unclear where Naruto was at this point in the series, and I don't think I've had a chance to see what happened, but when I woke up, I was already well on my way to finding him. No, that wasn't supposed to happen when the Water Power Man was attacked by the Naruto buddy. Water Power Man left shortly after I was freed, and I'm quite sure that Naruto's friend was supposed to attack the Eight Tails, fail, and then go. But we were whole mess. We didn't even follow the plot or anything. In order for Naruto's companion to join the dangerous clan and follow B, it is anticipated that Itachi will pass away before he pursues the Eight Tails. After he chases the Eight Tails and Itachi dies, I think Pain will attack Konoha, which hasn't happened yet or just won't happen. Water Power Man was supposed to go after the Jinchuriki first, while Toby was supposed to take in the Naruto buddy first, followed by the Shadow Headmaster. That was the way it was supposed to have happened, according to Kishimoto. Then what in hell happened along the road? What went wrong? Who, what, and when? Hello? A tiny voice startled me out of my concentration, and when I finally looked around, I realized that I had wandered into a small settlement that I had never seen before. A small child, hardly larger than my thigh, began to follow me. When I asked, "Do you need anything?" he shook his head and looked up at me with large round brown eyes. He was a cute little man with a round face, big eyes, shoulder-length untidy hair, and plump yet controllable cheeks. "Can I walk with you?" I said yes while allowing his smile to fill my heart. Just because I belonged to the dangerous clan didn't mean that I was like them. As we resumed our walk, the tiny child took hold of my hand and hung on. Despite the fact that we didn't look alike, many stopped to gawk and remark on how cute my child was. My initial thought was, of course, that he wasn't mine, and that I was just strolling with him. I looked at the child again and wondered for a moment if Furuka was my wife, or if he did look like me at all. He inherited my dark eyes, confident manner, and curious smile, but he also had Iruka's tan complexion, narrow nose, and unkempt brown hair. This child appeared to be our fictitious love child, and I laughed at that absurd notion. When we got to the outskirts of the hamlet, I took his hand gently and said, "You should go back home, I'm sure your parents are waiting for you." He grimaced slightly and continued, "My parents won't miss me. Can I stay with you, lady? Please?" It's possible that he mimicked my look when he asked, "Why would you want to stay with me? You merely met me." He said, "But you're nicer than anyone I've ever met." I scowled and said, "How old are you? What's your name?" "I'm 5 years old, my name is Keke." He gripped my knees and began to cry as I squeezed my lips together and whispered, "Well, Keke, would you mind staying here? I have to go." Only little children could make that kind of cry, and if you didn't, you would never get over it. "And no, please stay," he pleaded in a whisper as he stopped sobbing, "because you remind me of mommy, please don't go." My mommy said that, but SS she never came home. If I said no, go home, I couldn't do the job well, but if I said yes, I'd have hell to pay back at the base. Perhaps I could take him to the base and leave him there so Amber can take care of him until I get back. No, given how close Amber and Hayden are, that is not a good idea. Oh, fuck. What if? No, how about? Yes, I could. Suddenly I was traveling in the same route back toward the base, a small hand gripping mine. What had I done? Where did this youngster come from? I remained in the hospital and was cared for around the clock. They had automatically scheduled me to see a psychiatrist because of the mental trauma I've experienced, which was the biggest piece of crap I've ever heard of. Since my horrible ADHD had already earned me a label of insanity, I assumed I would be alright. What happened to that, by the way? I'm not saying I missed it, but I wasn't using any drugs when I last checked. In fact, in the Naruto reality, I hadn't taken it in a while. Has it vanished? Was I cured? I remember that the world-to-world flashes started when I last took my prescription. I completely forgot to take it since I was so nervous. That means I have to be better, right? Did my brain have a better part? I genuinely hope so. I think I was anticipating the MRI scan results for once. The doctor, who introduced himself as Dr. Roque, came in and sat down next to the hospital bed. "Good afternoon, Luna. How are you doing today?" I smiled at him for once. He poses a question that normally just annoys me. Pretty good, actually. I was wondering about my ADHD, and I realized I hadn't taken any medication in quite some time, so I thought maybe the crash caused something in my brain to go right. He took off his glasses and left them dangle on the chain. "Wonderful observation. Indeed, all your scans came back clean. That's actually what I wanted to talk about today, and I'm glad you figured it out," he remarked. I fell asleep during his speech as usual, only listening long enough to answer questions when they came up. He was mostly talking and taking notes while I wondered. As I began to think, I found that my thoughts were less confused and more distinct than when I had first woken up. The thought pleased me since it meant that at least one small part of my life was going well. Until Dr. Roque asked, "Did you dream about anything, Luna? Anything you can remember?" I continued to ignore him, and I was shocked. I kept quiet and simply pondered. It couldn't possibly have been a dream. Amber had accidentally stabbed me with a kunai during training, and I promptly looked at the area on my arm where she had done it. The remaining scar was there, among the many others. The others, I concluded, were from the car crash. "No," I asserted, "I can't recall if I did." "Very well," he jotted down his last scribbles and walked away. After he went for the day, I couldn't stop thinking. Of course, it wasn't a dream. It had to be real. Osana, Amber, the dangerous clan, and the dangerous clan god. I wonder how Osana reacted when she learned what had happened to Itachi. Lost chapter. Amber. Luna was in the middle of shifting planets, and I was out doing the dirty work. I asked Itachi about his plan, and if he said it was to kill Osana, I threatened to rip his red power eyes out of their sockets and use them against him. I sighed since that didn't make sense. Why would he just tell me what he really wanted to do? I thought about how to manage this, forcing myself to ignore my inner idiot. When I wasn't troubling Itachi, I was looking for the snake's den. I never discovered any proof that a living entity had been present or that mad experiments were being conducted. At first, I thought Toby would want to keep her close, but I couldn't do so after trying several times to get rid of any traps or genjutsu. Maybe I didn't have enough experience, but I didn't know what to do. With all the disasters that were happening, it seemed for a long time that there was absolutely no chance. God, Tadara is such a fool. He should have known better than to plunge into war, despite his youth. This time, Sasori was with Granite, but I'm not sure what made him believe he could win the second battle, when he had already lost the first. That's a lie, actually. Since he hadn't used his suicide bomb or anything, I guess he thought he could win. What still bothers me is that he was unable to defeat his friend, even though I was really hoping he could have at least cut off an arm or blew out one of his eyes. I didn't even give Tadara a scratch because I thought he was a complete failure. He's dead now, even if he's still amazing. But grief, how long has it been since we lost Osana? Whether it's 6 weeks or anything, it's already been too long. Itachi simply replies that Osana is dead when I keep telling him that I will find her. Itachi keeps saying something about switching back to his backup plan. It continues bouncing around in my head, and every time I hear her name and that term in the same sentence, I get out of breath. It hurts every emotion I could possibly arouse, including fear, grief, and rage, and gives me the impression that all I've done thus far has been in vain. I was worn out when Itachi returned to Plan B. That had to happen, of course, and Itachi fought him. Naturally. Even though I only saw a significant amount of the fight, I was surprised by what Itachi told him at the conclusion. Instead of simply apologizing, he concluded by saying that he ought to locate Osana. He had spoken, and I had been close enough to hear. He said something more as well, but I couldn't hear it, since he lowered his voice to a whisper. I think he deliberately said the first part out loud so I could hear it too, and he must have known I was there. There was a momentary silence before the second battle began as Itachi slid down the wall. My pal from Naruto and I went at it. I needed to let off some steam, and my friend, Naruto, because he's a jerk. I stumbled onto the base where Kabuto was holding her after managing to break free in the middle. How very useful. I found it odd that I had stumbled across the entryway. I was too hurt to fight Kabuto and his goon, so I decided to ignore it for the moment. I then went back to the base of the dangerous clan. A few days later, a veiled Naruto companion appeared. Oh no. Itachi finally realized that Naruto was dead when his friend arrived. I was angry that I could do nothing about it. I was already a little angry over Kakuzu's death so long ago, but what else could I have done? We were not allowed to fight under Pain's careful eye, but we looked at each other wildly whenever we passed in the corridors. In the fight for Osana, I was defeated by Kabuto, but at least I survived. But as I staggered back into the base, I barely had time to speak to Luna before passing out. I had temporarily forgotten about Itachi and Tadara's deaths, so I was ecstatic to wake up and see Osana alive and in the base. All I had yearned for was for the three of us to be together again, alive and whole. Of course, plans don't always work out. Now, I'm curious whether Amber ever got Osana back. I really hope so, and if it is, I have to go back there right away. Without thinking about anything else, I closed my eyes and went to sleep. But now, I could only drift into a sort of limbo instead of falling asleep. I was beginning to get sleeplessness, and I could feel the signs beginning to show around my eyes. Even though I was still physically exhausted, my mind was always functioning and didn't have the usual breaks. Thinking, observing, and dreaming. I felt like a kid again when I thought about everything and nothing at the same time. The heart monitor they still had on me blinked silently every now and again from my left. I was still too weak to eat because my body was still healing from not being able to move. The material in the IV drip made soft bubbling noises as my blood absorbed the nourishment. I was afraid that I would never be able to see them again, that I would never be able to go back to the Naruto world, and that I would never be able to hang out with my friends in the dangerous clan. I didn't want to live here. I didn't want to stick to my original plan, have a regular job, or go to college after that incredibly freeing experience of being a true ninja. When I opened my eyes, I saw that everything was dark except for my phone's screen, and that there was a buzzing sound coming from the nightstand beside my bed. My phone was here, but why? Where had it come from? It has never gone off so far. I pushed a hand over and looked at the messages. The screen displayed an endless stream of notifications for new Naruto episodes. Yes, I did fail to notice that. I thought about watching a couple, but because I was missing my headphones, I put my phone back. I wished I could just get back to our world and text Osana or Amber to let them know I was alright. I'd like to. But was I unable to wait? Ultimately, Osana provided me with access to something that is exclusively accessible online. I snatched up my phone and sent them each a quick message. Lina, even though I'm well, I still miss you all. Since I didn't get an answer and wasn't really expecting one anyhow, I tossed my phone on the bed and stared up at the ceiling. I felt vulnerable, helpless, and most of all, frail in this body and on this planet. I was so exhausted from just taking my phone off the stand that I could hardly move, even though I needed to go for a stroll and breathe. What might I do? There was nobody else available. In the back of my mind, I pictured how real Toby's masked face would look, how cute or scary. I could feel his hand gripping mine with a phony joy and his spine-crushing embrace, as we thrashed our arms and occasionally hit people. As I closed my eyes, I could almost feel his hand on top of mine, even though it was generally frigid. I think I could almost hear his voice shouting my name, Luna-senpai. Senpai Luna. I thought I heard movement, and the door looked to be opening and closing. There seemed to be more voices in the room, which was odd. But the one I could hear the best was Toby. He was yelling, Luna-senpai. Over and over. I didn't answer. I just listened to his voice, which was quieter than I remembered. Toby was annoying, but he was cute. He felt as though he were truly there, with a sense of actuality. His hand was warm against mine. He sounded too genuine, too real. He seemed to be right there, shouting in my ear for me to wake up, so I frowned. Wait a moment. While I was still in the hospital, I sighingly opened my eyes as the morning light started to come in through the windows. Was I? Do you have a dream? Had I actually learned how to go to sleep? I felt more refreshed than I had in days. I felt at ease and content. Compared to the previous day, my body didn't seem as stressed. I was cold, as I usually am when I wake up in a hospital, so I enjoyed the warmth of the light. A tiny blue jay was chirping at the windowsill, and I realized that the window was open for once when I looked out. I believed I had heard a bird. I figured I must have been sleeping, and more importantly, dreaming, as the cool summer wind drifted in. Or maybe I came back, returning to the other planet. It felt so genuine, though, if it was a dream. It seemed so genuine to me. When I clasped my hands together to think, I saw that one was as cold as usual and the other. The temperature was deliciously warm. Foolishly, Toby hurried inside the kitchen. He began by sprinting straight into the refrigerator, while frantically attempting to use his arms to slow down his erratic speed. No one in the kitchen could understand a word he was saying because he was stuttering and bouncing around so much. He was out of breath and we couldn't hear him over his air intakes. He started to wave his arms more violently while we were just staring at him, which led to his kissing the earth as he plummeted and crashed face first. Toby began to roll about on the ground, afraid of something. We all just turned our backs on him. Then, suddenly, he grabbed me by the arms and hurried so fast that he nearly carried me to the room where Luna was. Like she always been, she was asleep. As the others began to slowly enter, Toby gestured to Luna sitting on the bed, and I crossed my arms in frustration. I yelled, "What? Look, senpai." I looked around and, for once, I could see Luna. I raised my arms and asked, "Is she?" "She's visible, Amber-san," Toby muttered as he took Luna's hand and held it tightly. I could only gape before backing up slowly and hitting someone's chest. When I looked around, I noticed Hayden without a shirt. When he said, "Holy fuck," he was airy. In an effort to lure Luna back to her realm while she was still aware, Toby began saying her name over and over. I didn't look back for a while as I listened to Toby calling for her. I shoved past Hayden and said, "Yeah," concurring. I was happy that Luna was getting better, but Osana wasn't there. She didn't celebrate with me. She was on some kind of godforsaken quest. Who was she helping anyway? Jashin. She herself. She was helping a friend, but which friend was really worth dying for? I would persuade her that I wasn't worth dying for, especially now that I'm immortal and Luna, well, she can judge for herself. I guess there wasn't anyone worth risking your life for besides us. Somehow, I wound up outside, watching the sunset and kicking a tree with my fist. When my bare knuckle touched, I was solely thinking of Osana, not about the discomfort of using chakra. That she would choose something that seemed so much more important than Luna's psychedelic party infuriated me. What about Jashin was so horribly important? What was she doing, and did the water power man give her the order? He's the only member of the dangerous clan that she wouldn't dare contradict because she fucking loves him. Was it Itachi? The weasel isn't dead, of course. Who might it be, then? On this plane of life, for whom was she doing this? It couldn't be for Luna because she would have told me long ago or maybe even involved me. Who is it for? I screamed as my now numb and bloodied hand made another organic indentation in the wood. Who? All thoughts of anger suddenly dissolved from my mind as another entity, Jashin, seized over. Amber, don't worry. I can't allow you to get worked up over something so unimportant as a disciple. Your friend will complete her homework successfully, and everything will work out perfectly. I'm not saying this to comfort you. The first preparations will crumble, and the hidden faces will be exposed. All you need to do is wait till the appropriate time. I know you're not very patient, but I think you can manage it. I took a moment to process the facts when my thoughts had calmed down. She would live, Osana, responded Jashin. Furthermore, isn't it true that someone is hiding? But here we are talking about the dangerous clan. Every single person has something to conceal. He did, however, mention that someone would soon be made public. A voice and an ache cut through my slumber. I felt heavy as Haydn slowly walked up to me and put his arm over my neck. What's the deal? I thought you were happy about the blondie coming back. I shoved him away, a little blood on his shoulder, and replied, I am. Osana just isn't here to know about it. Haydn raised a silver eyebrow and gave me a blank stare. He gestured to my hand a little later. You're bleeding. I looked at my left hand and stated, I'm aware, as my talents caused the agony to subside rapidly, and the cut to gradually heal. But the blood continued to flow rapidly, and I was beginning to feel lightheaded. Oh no, there were so many problems with me, and I'm anemic. That should have been resolved by being a Jashinist, but it wasn't. It's a bad combo, in my opinion. In order to hurt others, I get to hurt myself, but I bleed to death first. By covering it with my palm and focusing healing energy on the wounds, I attempted to decrease the flow of the thin blood that was running in rivers. I just sent him a glare since shoving him away would need a hand that wasn't in use, and I didn't have any right now. You're pale too. I mean paler than normal, I replied. Just get me inside, he muttered with a shrug, then he opened the granite door and closed it behind us. When I removed it, the wound had vanished, but my hand was still gushing blood. As I rushed to wash off, Haydn followed me into the bathroom and sat on the toilet. You always bleed that hard. Yes, you retard, I'm hemophilic, I exclaimed, gritting my teeth. He raised his head. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? No one is gay around here. Not homophobic, you dumbass, hemophilic. Are you deaf? It means I don't have as much blood as normal people, therefore when I bleed a lot I get lightheaded quicker than usual people. I'm just grateful I don't have corticosteroids too. What's that? My glove washed and dried on the sink, and then I said, enough, health class is over. I'm going to go try and make dinner. My chakra and eternal powers had already fully healed the wound, so I didn't need to hide it. Haydn followed me out like a curious dog, asking what types of stupid diseases were in my world. While I was preparing something that Osana cooked often enough for me to recognize the concept, Haydn continued to talk animatedly about who knows what. I proceeded to avoid setting the base on fire, while Haydn dodged, or didn't bother to dodge, the knives I threw at him for practice. I needed something to do, in part, since I didn't want to stand there while the food cooked. With the exception of the strange knife, it felt nearly like we were in a normal home setting. No one else was in the kitchen at the time, so it was just the two of us sipping from a glass of water. Toby raced into the residence a few minutes ago without any explanation, and his exuberant personality made it seem as though a child was present. It felt like a weird sort of family when he paused to sniff whatever I was making and started to gather the others. As the members of the dangerous clan moved around the kitchen, I sensed it and suddenly understood why Osana loved to cook. Death didn't seem like such a terrible threat, it was comfortable, and for once I felt needed. I used to hate the food I was preparing since we ate tacos so much, but now that I've seen everyone, I can say with confidence that I like them again. After supper was made, eaten, and the kitchen cleared up, I felt more relaxed than ever, and considered starting a cooking class. I'll never be a 5-star chef like her, but I aim to at least earn a 3-star rating. My anger and dislike of her decision had subsided to a little irritation. I became conscious of and grateful for the shit she did at that time. Haydn lingered behind to watch me clean up, of course without offering to help, and then we walked back to his room together. Not holding hands or anything, just enjoying the silence. We went inside after I had barely closed the door, and Hayden turned to sneer at me, saying, "I thought you said you couldn't cook." I shrugged and told him, "I'm learning, get over it." His sneer softened slightly, and his lips suddenly met mine. They departed as soon as they got there, and he made a joke about the shower and asked, "Care to join?" I threw a pillow at him, red in the face, and shouted, "In your fucking dreams." "Already there," he responded as the door latched and closed. "Fuck you," I complained at the wall. He was a true jerk, hiding. After Hayden finished his self-proclaimed shower, I took one myself, trying to forget about Osana and concentrate only on my present situation. Luna was half live, I'd cooked, and nobody had died. At least things were going a little more steadily. I got out and looked at my still pale reflection in the hazy mirror. My wet hair was longer than usual, hanging an inch over my shoulders. I should probably get a haircut because normally it hung just below the nape of my neck. I had no idea who it was, but maybe I could get Osana to do something when she gets back. A sharp buzz made me jump. I looked everywhere and eventually found it in my jeans pocket. My phone started ringing out of the blue. I don't know how it got into my pocket or where it came from, but I turned the screen on. The solitary unread mail. Who was texting me was unknown to me. What on earth was I doing, God? I walked lightly in front of the entryway. I looked down at Keke, who was still holding my hand tightly, and was beginning to gnaw his fingernails in anxiety. I mentally admonished myself, "Don't bite your nails, it's not good," as a motherly indulgence. He said, "Sorry," and then stopped suddenly. I finally felt the blood flow as I let go of his hand and tousled his short hair. His eyes were fixed on the huge boulder in front of him, and I noticed that his cheeks were evenly sprinkled with freckles. I sighed deeply and placed a limp hand on the door, whispering, "You're positive you want to stay with me?" He smiled sweetly, nodded, and replied, "Yes." I partially opened the door. Halfway through, Keke tugged on my shirt and said, "You're so strong, are you a ninja?" As I agreed and started to open the door, I looked into his big, white doe eyes and said, "Yeah, maybe I'll teach you a thing or two to protect yourself." God, what was I doing? Don't make any promises. The door was fully open when Keke cautiously stepped in front of me, and I gestured for him to come closer. I realized now that the only thing I could do was to hope for a better result. I said, "Well, we're here," with a lot of excitement. Keke's eyes opened and he started to leap about the living room, but it only took me a second to realize that Amber and Hayden were sleeping on the couch together. The last thing I thought as I watched Keke wave his palm in front of Amber's face was, "Oh, how strangely cute." I swiftly grabbed him, "Keke, that's Amber and Hayden, you shouldn't wake them up when they're sleeping. Actually, don't wake anyone up unless it's me, alright?" He said, "Okay," and nodded. As we were tiptoeing away, I turned the corner and bumped into Water Power Man's chest. When our eyes met, I could see that he was immediately questioning Keke's presence, as he automatically grabbed my shoulders to keep me balanced. "Why is there a kid in the Dangerous Clan base?" he asked plainly, sounding mostly as though he didn't want to deal with any of this right now. I breathed in deeply. He wouldn't leave me alone. And I panicked. The Water Power Man raised a blue hand to Keke's face in rage, and I could see him looking at him from the nooks and crannies of his fingers. He hissed, "What are you looking at, kid?" With a shriek, Keke seized my leg and remarked, "I thought you looked pretty." Water Power Man gave me a weird look, so I rolled my eyes and started to go to Pain's office while he was still on my leg. "You're not pretty. You're handsome, okay?" I muttered as I passed him, laughing. I left Water Power Man in the hallway, still stunned by the shell, and then I went around another corner to Pain's office. Keke laughed and remarked, "He likes you." I raised an eyebrow in response to his rage and said, "Oh yeah? And what makes you say that?" His eyes were really big and focused on you, like how Daddy always used to look at Mommy. "You're quite perceptive, youngster," I smiled. "Oh? Sorry." Osana was the sorry's sudden remark as she grabbed my elbow and opened the door. He looked at Keke. He continued, "I can explain," but before I could respond more, he held up a hand, and I believed I heard a slight jingle. "Don't even try. I assume you're going to Pain's office." I gave him a nod, and he went out of his way to allow me go first. "Thanks, Dana." Another area was occupied by Konan, another dangerous member of the clan. She looked at Keke, and I could tell she was a little upset. I held my breath the entire time, even though she turned her head away as we passed, obviously leaving Pain to shout. "I am scared." I tapped on the door, and Keke's grip tightened. I massaged his head and said, "It's okay, everything will be fine, Keke," but I became aware that I was saying this more to myself than to him. I hoped everything would be alright. Pain could kill us both by physical force if he so desired. I was hoping he wouldn't have a rod up his ass today. "Enter," I said, and as soon as I opened the door, Pain saw the child on my leg. He let out a sigh and just arched an eyebrow, demanding an explanation. Disregarding my concern, I tried to explain the issue as best I could, half for him and half for myself. He had already stopped the sentences. "I was on my mission, and..." "Mission?" "Yes, Itachi," I replied, my brows wrinkled. The way his eyebrows drew together this time made it difficult for me to read his face. "Itachi. Right. I was unable to determine whether he was angry with me. I remarked, "You don't sound too sure about that, Pain," and nodded subtly. He shook his head and looked away from us. I talked to him before I left. What had Itachi forgotten about his goal for me? I didn't think Pain was forgetful, but I was aware of his hectic schedule. He turned his chair slightly away from us and continued, "No matter. Continue your explanation. Why have you brought a child into the base?" Well, I couldn't think of anything to say. I bit my lip, looking down at Keke, who looked at me expectantly. I then realized that this was a really, extremely horrible decision, because this youngster was relying on me to give him a place to live. "You don't have an explanation?" Pain questioned, raising an unamused eyebrow at me. I do, it's just that I will," was all I could manage. My thoughts seemed to be just on the tip of my tongue, but every time I tried to speak, they would only jumble in my head. "Excuse me," a voice said quietly. We turned our gaze toward the voice. Then I muttered, "Keke." My skin became blotchy as his fingers sank more into my calf. I just wanted to be with a family. He clamped down on her. "Family did you say?" Pain whispered. For a half-second, his features softened, and I tried not to look at him. I raised my head to clear the fog. "Right. Pain, I would like to take this boy under my wing. I want to raise him as my own and keep him as safe as I can, even within the base." He followed me around one of the towns and I just couldn't say no to him. I knew it would take a lot of willpower to get Pain to agree. The ranting match that was about to start was something I was prepared for. At last, my maternal instincts kicked in, and I was ready to defend this boy. I headed for his head with my chakra primed, ready to block any projectiles that could try to reach me. I was ready. "Very well," I responded, losing my confidence. So I was completely unprepared. "What? No questions. He may stay, but it's your duty to inform the others." "What?" We were shoved out the door and slammed shut by a powerful, invisible hand. I said, "No questions. Now leave. You can question my decision later," the hand replied. Stunned, I merely stared at the door. Even though I was beginning to smile, Keke, who was sitting next to me, burst out laughing and questioned, "What's so funny?" I raised an eyebrow and said, "That guy, he seemed nice." But I didn't question a little child's opinion. I responded, as I began to guide him back to the room where Water Power Man and I were. "You talk pretty fluently for a 5-year-old. He smiled toothily and replied, "I like to talk to my mommy when she was around." I needed to know what had happened to said mom, but I didn't want to see him cry. That's what happens when you have a love child with someone who doesn't exist, I guess. Like Ruka, he was cute, kind, and the kind of person who didn't look good crying. "Well, what about your dad, if you can say?" Takei drew circles on my calf and said, "He got rid of me. He said if mommy didn't want me, then he didn't either." I was crying when I realized that this kid's presence at the base was the best idea I've ever had, aside from the dangerous clan being horrible criminals. Even though that might have been the worst idea I've ever had, it was still preferable than some of my previous ideas. We encountered Water Power Man again when we entered his room. "Good news," I added, "Keke gets to stay." He gave us a clumsy look without looking directly at me. "What?" he asked after glancing at that. Determined to learn the truth for himself, the Water Power Man rushed out the door. His response was, "Yeah, go ahead and ask Pain." Keke's grip was slipping as he yawned away from me. "Can I take a nap?" I lifted him up and laid him carefully on the bed, saying, "Of course." He smiled and cuddled up to me, saying, "It smells like the ocean." "I like the ocean. Is that going to be my new daddy?" When I realized he was referring to Water Power Man, I blushed a little. Maybe Keke is what I would personally want to think. I stood up to leave when he stretched and yawned. He murmured softly, "I like him," and I heard him inquire, "Where are you going?" "I'll be back in a bit. I promise I'll be back before you wake up." I was near the doorframe when his eyes drooped, and I looked back in time to see, "Oh, okay. Thank you, Mommy." I ignored the physicians who frequently came to examine me. They did not blame my frustration on my mental trauma or any other factor. But in reality, I was just becoming annoyed when they cut me off from my thoughts. I was genuinely unable to stop thinking. It was all I could do, really. The only reason I was here was because I was safe and well back in the dangerous clan base. I was so weak in this world, the real one, because I was so inactive. I was such a pale shadow of who I used to be. I didn't want to look in the mirror because it made me feel like a skeleton. I didn't want to see my face till I could get up again. I had a confused mind and believed that everything was a dream, even without the distraction of ADHD. Everything I see is completely fake and unreal. The back of my throat hurt whenever I drank, coughed, hiccuped, or yawned. It was there all the time, creeping and scratching to escape. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but the doctor told me it was because I hadn't spoken for almost a year. When I looked out the window, I saw a bird, and it seemed like there were always birds outside my windowsill, chirping continuously while making an effort to keep a positive and happy disposition. They were beginning to really irritate me. Stillness, I think, would, for once, make me feel at ease. Calm in my head, listening to the air, and enjoying the sun on my face. One of the nurses took me outside today. I felt very limited because I couldn't run, walk, or climb trees, but at least I could move about now that I was in a wheelchair. My chakra isn't as strong here as it is there, so maybe not so much about the trees, but I would do anything to just be able to stand. Even though they were at least paying for the medical bills, I wasn't shocked when the doctors informed me that the rest of my family never showed up. My days were as boring as normal. The other people I could call friends or rather acquaintances sent me flowers and cards wishing me a quick recovery. I was looking out the window and eating a package of cookies that 2 people had given me. Even though I felt completely wretched here, I did find some delight in sleep. When I closed my eyes that night and my brain finally went into dream mode, I could almost see the faces of Osana, Amber, and Toby staring at me. But the fact that they were just watching me seemed odd. They were silent and did not try to revive me to their reality. They just stared. I wanted to scream at them, "Wake me up. Please, I can't stand it here anymore." But I was unable to do so or say anything. I groaned. How long had it been? A month or 2 at the very least, maybe longer. I've long since lost track of time. The next day, I got my own wheelchair. Even though I was still unable to walk, I was overjoyed to be able to get out of bed. After meeting some people and kids who were destined to live their entire lives in hospitals, it made me unhappy to think that I would be stuck in this environment again. The odd thing about everything thus far is that I could hear, smell, and feel everything around me even in my dreams. I could feel cold hands on mine almost all the time. Whatever cologne Toby was wearing, I could clearly smell it, albeit it might have been his natural scent. I could hear voices, but I could only see their faces, their lips still white as they stared at me. I could hear Toby babbling on about nothing while he spoke to me. Usually when I got up, I was really let down since it was so lovely and clear. If these kinds of nightmares continue, I will undoubtedly go insane. The nightmares were beginning to get to me, and I could already feel the real madness beginning to set in. Because of the emotion, I began to question what had truly occurred and what hadn't. Did I spend a year or more in Naruto world? Did my best friends really get stuck there with me? I realized that I had no value in this world. There were none of my best friends who always supported me. I didn't have a really angry partner, but at the end of the day, I still loved them. I had no one to constantly annoy without risk of death. I had absolutely nothing. I had a dark thought one day. What if I took away from me my life? I can certainly do it again because I've already passed away, particularly if I plan to go back to that world. Being there was pointless, and I would definitely burn in hell if I killed myself, but what if it doesn't work? What happens if I end up somewhere else? Where can I find no second chance? What if I can never get back to that part of the universe? What if there were too many what ifs? So what was I supposed to do? There was nobody around to help. It's not going to help me here. In fact, I know it's going to make things worse and keep me stuck here for a lot longer. How long has it been since then? The nurse told me it had been almost 5 months when I asked her one day. I've been thinking about that dream non-stop since I had it for the first time 2 months ago. Toby. What had happened to me? Dangerous clan. What on earth went wrong? Amber. I had nothing left to do but explore the earth with nothing left to hope for. The ocean. I now thought about my family, my friends Osana and Amber, and the dangerous clan. The brightness I would so desperately cling to was gone. I started laughing. What a pathetic irony. Although I've always been extremely afraid of death, I'm now wishing for it. Ah damn it, Toby. Without paying any more attention to it, I closed my eyes and dreamed. Amber looked down at me, her face soft as she tried to figure out what was going on, and there we were, me, leaning on something. Toby sat quietly, and I could feel the roughness of his glove as he held it in my hand. Then came Osana. She wasn't crying or smiling, but she was trying to comfort someone. Who was that? Who was that boy? He looked youthful, but I wasn't sure because I couldn't really see him from this perspective. As I tried to tilt my head, I was startled to find my line of sight shift sideways. I was in control of my dreams today. I squeezed Toby's hand in mine, trying to reassure him that I was okay. All I could do was stare at this mirage, trying to convince it that I would somehow survive. The tiny youngster pointed to me, and I tried to respond, "Hey," when his face suddenly filled my entire range of vision. The voice was slow, quiet, and deep, like a slow-motion movie. He waved his hand in front of my face, and I tried to smile. Since I couldn't feel any of my muscles move and there was no further reaction, I concluded nothing had happened. Osana's voice echoed in my head, "Loon," as she suddenly materialized and took hold of my hand. It was slow and hard to hear, as if we were underwater. Then everything was clear as if I had just woken up. Osana's white eyes stared at me and said, "Nah." I blinked. "Huh. Luna," said Toby, "you're back." I hardly had 5 seconds to take in my surroundings before I passed out and woke up in the hospital.